this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. That's Dave Biddle, and that means we are talking Ohio State on Summer School on the Cover 3 podcast, the defending national champions. Bucknuts has you covered. Dave, welcome back, man.
Oh, great to be here, Bud. Always appreciate doing this with you.
It was fun last year, and you nailed it. It was at least a natty appearance or bust, but they certainly expected to make a run for it, and they did. Kind of an up and down season at times, but if you get the ring at the end, we just kind of mostly write off everything else, right? What's the vibe in Columbus right now?
Yeah, the vibe is just people are still, as we like to say, still basking in the glow of the national championship. And I had a lot of people ask me, even when I was down in Atlanta covering the national championship game, even before the game, I have some national writers ask me, well, if Ohio State wins, does that get the fan base off Ryan Day's back? I'm like, yeah, if they win the national championship, that's going to get the fans off his back for sure. And the fans, now, are the fans happy he's 1-4 against Michigan, has lost 4 straight games? No, the fans are not happy about that. But winning a natty cures all, and it's a pretty good vibe here in Columbus and throughout Buckeye Nation.
A boatload of turnover on this team. I think we'll start on offense here. So Chip Kelly got an absolute bag to go back to call plays in the NFL, and Brian Hartline finally gets the call that I think a lot of people thought eventually he would get. I don't know if it's possible to parse this, but how will the offense change under him, and how will the offense change just due to different personnel being around this year?
They might throw it a little bit more, but then again, they're breaking in, if you assume, like I do, that Julian Sayin is going to be the guy, they're breaking in a redshirt freshman quarterback that's played all 4 games last year and has thrown maybe 12 passes at the collegiate level. And even though Will Howard slipped to the 6th round, Will Howard was really good for Ohio State last year, especially in the playoffs. He played really well in the playoffs, and his leadership was off the charts too, Bud. Will Howard was he's a leader of men. Is Julian Sayin going to be able to do that? But, focusing on Hartline, yeah, I think he wants to throw the ball a little bit more, but then again, this offensive line looks pretty good. Despite losing the 2 running backs that went early in the second round, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they like their situation at running back. But man, when you got Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and those guys, getting Max Clare from the portal, Brandon Ennis, they're going to want to attack with their weapons. So I think they might throw it a little bit more, but then again, this is Ryan Day's offense. So this is going to be catered to what Ryan Day wants to do. But unlike 2 years ago when Brian Hartline was offensive coordinator in name only, and we were hearing maybe he'll call plays, maybe he won't. This year they're committed. As you said, he's going to be the play caller. He was calling plays throughout spring. I think he's ready. He's got big shoes to fill. Chip Kelly did a really good job here last year. So, but I think it was kind of now or never for Brian Hartline. It's his time to be the play caller. And if things go south, Ryan Day can step in and be the play caller. But Bud, he wants to be that CEO. He made that move last year, kind of taking a page out of Saban's book, worked pretty well. So he doesn't want to go back to calling plays, even though that's his baby. But if things go south, and he would probably make that move to go back to being the play caller.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned Sayin, former 5-star, really, really storied high school career. What did you see or hear from him in spring that leads you to believe he's the dude?
Yeah, he's got some traits that are just you can see why he was a 5-star. Some had him ranked as the number 1. I think we had him ranked as the number 1 quarterback in the country. If not, it's splitting hairs. Those top 3 guys were pretty much all ranked together in that class. He's got a very quick release. He's got a special quick release. He's very accurate with the ball most of the time. He missed some throws this spring, including one in the spring game. That was an absolute layup. Would have been a touchdown to Mylan Graham, a wide receiver who's really coming on. So the accuracy wasn't pinpoint, but that's definitely one of his strong suits. He doesn't have a cannon, but he's got a strong enough arm. I think he's got probably a stronger arm than Will Howard. And Will Howard, showed late in the season he could throw the deep ball. Not a very big guy, but some people have asked me, but is he really? Because Ohio State lists him at 6'1". And Ohio State does a really good job listing height and weights accurately on their roster. When guys go to the combine each year, it's like, oh, Ohio State actually lists their guys pretty accurately. So people ask me, is he really 6'1"? It's like anything, he's a little taller than 6'1". I'm not worried about his height. He says he's 6'2". I've looked at him I've talked to him face to face. He's every bit of 6'1.5". So I'm not worried about his height, but he's not very big. He definitely needs to add some muscle. He's listed at 205. He's probably more like 200, right around there. So how's he going to hold up physically? Because, they have Lincoln Keenholz as well. He's entering his third year, and they have true freshman Tavian St. Clair, and that's it in the quarterback room. So they're putting a lot on, presuming Julian Sayin is going to be the starting quarterback, and I think he will be. It's putting a lot on him. Leadership-wise, being a young guy, how is he going to, take control of this team and be the leader of this team that Will Howard was? And then, again, is he going to hold up physically, in a long season, especially if they have to play 16 games again, which is a problem you want to have. You're playing 16 games, you're in the title game. So it's interesting, man. I think he's going to do well at Ohio State. My question, Bud, is when? Like, when is Julian Sayin going to be good? Is it going to be right away against Texas? I think that's a lot to ask. First game as a starter, you're playing the Longhorns, who are going to come here for wanting blood, obviously. Is it going to be sometime middle of the season, end of the season? Is it going to be next year before he becomes a good quarterback? I don't know. I'm convinced he's going to be a good starting quarterback at Ohio State. My question is how early?
And the schedule-wise, not to just jump ahead of the schedule, but there are some pretty challenging games in the first 2 months of the season that are like you don't think, okay, Ohio State, Illinois, but like at Illinois with a lot coming back, at Wisconsin, it's kind of a desperate Wisconsin team, like not an easy place to play. Obviously, Washington. I had Damon Williams on my top 10 quarterback list to start the year. Like that kid is. If Ohio State fans have not watched the bowl game they had against Louisville, you should. They were playing him a lot, even over 24-year-old. Will Rogers some last year. Then he started the bowl game and crushed, and he went for like 300, 200. So that's pretty dynamic guy there. And as you mentioned, the Texas game, protecting Sayin, because he's not a slug, at least from what I remember of him, but he's definitely not a guy that like scares you a lot with his legs, right? Like if you're a D coordinator, I think you're like permissive to let him run up to a point, maybe. Who's protecting him, and what do you project for the offensive line this year?
The offensive line looks really good leaving spring, and it was a blessing in disguise. I almost said almost. It was a blessing in disguise, and this is going to sound crazy, but stay with me here. I feel bad for the guys that got hurt. Josh Simmons, even though he ended up being a first-round pick, and then, of course, Seth McLaughlin wins the Remington Award, goes undrafted. That's too bad for him. But for Ohio State, if you're just looking at it from Ohio State's perspective, those injuries, as crazy as it sounds, were a blessing in disguise. Why? Because now all these guys that weren't playing at all ended up being like starters on the national championship team and playing well. Guys like Carson Hinsman at center, Luke Montgomery at left guard. They were missing in action. It's not like, well, it helps the team this year, but it hurt the team last year. They won the national championship despite those injuries. And now these guys have all this experience. The guys that were playing even before the injuries, Austin Sareveld, who had a great offseason, played really well in the CFP. He's coming back as a third-year sophomore. Tegra Shabola, another guy that played a bunch. He's coming back as a fourth-year junior. Hinsman's coming back as the center. Luke Montgomery as the left guard. I think they landed one of the most underrated guys in the portal in Ethan Onionwa from Rice. He's a guy that Tom Luganbill said he thought was going to be a second-round pick if he left. I don't know if he would have been a second-round pick if he would have been in this year's draft, but he's a plug-and-play left tackle. He's got 1 year left. Massive guy, 6'6", about 340 pounds. So they like him. They're probably going to move Austin Sareveld from guard out to right tackle. So they feel really good about the offensive line, Bud. They've got some decent depth there with guys like Josh Padilla and Ian Moore, who young guys who are pretty highly rated, 4-star recruits. So, man, going into the season last year, it was a concern. Turns out they had the Remington Award winner and 2 future first-round picks with Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons. And then even with the injuries, they ended up playing well. So now offensive line is expected to be a strength for this team this year.
Running back last year, they lost 2 really good ones. Like those, Dave, I was so impressed by the buy-in they got. Like Judkins and Henderson both, like they blocked their butts off for each other and for Will, but both in like some of the QBs, like QB ISO game and then in pass pro. Like they were giving great effort, which I thought was like, that's kind of cool. They got that level of buy-in from those 2 backs sharing targets. Now both are off to the NFL. What are we looking like in the backfield here?
Yeah, that's the best tandem at tailback that I've seen during my time watching Ohio State football. I barely missed. Probably the gold standard at Ohio State. Not probably. The gold standard at Ohio State would be when Archie Griffin and Pete Johnson played together. Pete scored a ton of touchdowns, and Archie, of course, won the back-to-back Heisman. A little before my time, but this was the best tailback tandem they had. And you're right. The way they bought in, you're willing to share carries, knowing that, the shelf life of an NFL running back is short. I don't want a bunch of wear and tear on my tires when they entered the league. And it worked out. They were both early second-round picks. So those are huge, huge shoes to fill for Ohio State. But I do like James Peoples as the starter, the projected starter. He's a guy that probably people who cover Ohio State aren't talking about quite enough because it's like, oh, look at Bo Jackson, the true freshman. Who's going to play? I think he'll be the number 3 tailback. And then they got a pretty solid transfer from West Virginia, and C.J. Donaldson. He'll be the backup. So you have James Peoples as a starter. I think he's going to have a good year. And C.J. Donaldson's going to be a good backup. Those guys are going to be as good as Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins? No, especially not right away this year or anytime this year. But if you're talking about the best tailback tandem I've seen at Ohio State. So they're not going to be better than that, but they're still in a good spot there. Bo Jackson came in ready to roll during spring. The only thing I don't like, man, he wears the number 25 and not the number 34. I feel like if you're Bo Jackson, you should be rocking that 34. But
Totally.
Sam Williams-Dixon flirted with the portal, entered the portal, and came back the winter portal. So he'll probably be the fourth string guy. They got a couple other true freshmen they like. But the top three guys coming out of spring, James Peoples, C.J. Donaldson, Bo Jackson, they like those guys, while acknowledging that they have massive shoes to fill.
For sure. And Donaldson, it strikes me that after the Penn State game, you go Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers. Like Donaldson's a guy that can take some carries. If you need to give him, I don't know, 60 carries in 3 weeks leading up to the Michigan game, so Peoples is nice and fresh. That's something they could do. And I thought Ohio State did a nice job of keeping their guys, like their skill guys, fresh last year. Leading, like they looked fast and fresh in that playoff run. So maybe we'll see some of that. All right, got to say Jeremiah Smith for SEO purposes. Summer school is really more about like finding out stuff we don't know about. Has Smith discussed on Bucknuts anything like he could do better because he's already pretty incredible?
Yeah, he's very humble, and and he stayed that way. He came in very humble despite all the accolades, and then even after he was kind of blowing up in practice and getting a lot of buzz, he still was humble. And even after he blew up, had this great freshman year, he still is humble. So if he stays that way, I mean, he's got the entire package. And then, speaking of his humility, you'll ask him that question, Bud, and he'll say, I can get better, a little bit better at everything, and that sometimes can sound like a cliche. He's not one of those guys that he believes that. I can get a little faster. I can jump, do everything a little better. I can get stronger. I mean, this kid comes in, he looks like an NFL receiver as a true freshman. It's amazing what he did. And I was one of these guys. I was like, all right, I have no doubt he's talented. This is like maybe this time last year. I'm like, but like even Marvin Harrison Jr. barely played as a true freshman. It's just hard to these true freshmen at Ohio State to live up to this billing right away. Well, J.J. Smith was the exception to that rule. It's pretty amazing what he did. It's not like they didn't have a lot of other wide receivers. They had a first-round wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka. They had Carnell Tate, and he still stole the show. So he feels like he can get a little bit better at everything. We're looking at probably the best receiver to come through here, and I don't say that lightly because they've produced a heck of a lot of great wide receivers at Ohio State. Chris Carter would probably be number one. Now, Jeremiah still has to beat him. Right now, I'd still put Chris Carter one, but Jeremiah Smith, unless he gets hurt, will leave Ohio State as the best receiver to come through here.
Absolutely. All right, so we're wrapping up offense here. Predict who will be the number 3 and number 4 guys in terms of targets, whether it be receivers or tight ends, and what's your confidence level in that prediction?
Yeah, I think Brandon Ennis taking over for Emeka in the slot. Oh, they're going to move Jeremiah Smith around so you can't. He's going to play some slot receiver too. Can you imagine you're a number 3 corner and all of a sudden you're in man coverage and you're a young guy and all of a sudden you're lining up against Jeremiah Smith one-on-one.
We saw that in the Rose Bowl.
We did. We did.
That was like okay. They've seen how Oregon. Man, Chip for sure had Tennessee's checks figured out, and I think in part he knew something on Oregon's rotations.
And Oregon even came into the game saying, yeah, we're going to play man. It's like, oh, okay. I thought maybe that was a smoke screen. But, I think Brandon Ennis will be 3rd or 4th. And then Max Clare, who was a great get in the portal from Purdue. I mean, he was really the only receiving threat for Purdue last year. He's getting double-teamed a lot. He'll never get double-teamed once at Ohio State. Max Clare, I think, will be either 3rd or 4th in receptions. That was almost a luxury get in the portal because they lost G. Scott Jr., who was the starter, but they had a bunch of guys coming back that they liked at tight end, like Jelani Thurman, Will Kazmarek, and some others. And you add Max Clare in there. It's a really good tight end room. So I think Max Clare is going to be either 3rd or 4th on this team in receptions. He's a really down the seam. He looks really dangerous. And again, for Purdue, everybody knew going against Purdue last year that he was their main weapon, and he still was able to produce at Purdue. So really good get by Ohio State in the portal.
So Graham and Porter are more like, hey, we're probably talking about them in 26.
Mylan Graham is we'll be talking about him this year. He looked great in the spring. He'll be that next guy at wide receiver. He's their number 4 wide receiver. And a lot of people say, he might be the number 3. But yeah, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, I'll say Brandon Ennis will be the 3 in the slot. And then Mylan Graham's that next guy. He's going to play a decent amount. Now he's not going to put up, you're the number 4 receiver. You're obviously not going to put up huge stats, but if somebody gets hurt, he'll be a starter. He looked great in the spring, Bud.
Nice. All right, let's take a quick break here. On the flip side, we're going to talk a little defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, y'all, back here on Summer School. We're talking Ohio State with my man, Dave Biddle of Bucknuts, the best Buckeyes website in the world. Dave, defense last year was salty, and now they lose. Well, it's probably easier to keep track of who they actually have coming back. Starts, and I guess let's go coordinator first. New coordinator comes in, Matt Patricia, which is an interesting choice. How did that come about, and what changes, if you can parse this for me? I know it's difficult. Like, what changes will be Patricia based, and what changes will just be necessitated by the personnel turnover?
I really feel like Patricia's going to have not full control, because Ryan Day will step in and say, hey, I still want the base. For example, he'll say things, I still want the base to be 4-2-5. Mix it up as much as you want, but I want the base to be 4-2-5. So stuff like that. So I think the difference we're going to see with Patricia is, and every coach says, right, that they adjust their scheme to the strength of their players, but Patricia walks the walk with that. He did that with the Patriots, and Ryan Day, I don't know if you can still consider him a Patriots fan, but he grew up a Patriots fan. I still know he really, really likes the New England Patriots, being a guy from New Hampshire. So I'm sure he's always, kind of like Matt Patricia anyway. And Patricia's a guy, first of all, it was kind of surprising, bud. You're ready for this kind of curmudgeon guy. That's kind of his personality, or kind of his reputation. He was really, really good to the media during the spring. Very jovial, and it didn't seem like an act. He's obviously lost a lot of weight. He seems like a changed man in many different facets, but he talks about how he will adjust his scheme to the strength of his players. So I do think one difference we're going to see this year, again, not base defense, but I think we're going to see more odd fronts from Ohio State's defense. You didn't see much of that last year, and why would you? You had 4 defensive linemen that all got drafted. So, and yeah, they're breaking in 8 new starters. So I think we're going to see them mix up a little, and we're going to see more 3 linebacker sets. We didn't see many of those last year because they really like their top 3 linebackers with Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese. Peyton Pierce is a guy that really came on in spring. James Laurinaitis called him, the linebacker coach at Ohio State, the former All-American, said Peyton Pierce is an absolute natural middle linebacker. So that's high praise coming from James Laurinaitis. So I think Patricia, it was interesting. Some Ohio State fans are like, whoa, really? Like, he was terrible with the Detroit Lions. It's like, well, the list of coaches who failed in the NFL but were good college coaches is long. Guys like Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier, Nick Saban. And he's not coming here to be head coach. Coming here to be defensive coordinator. Did a pretty good job with the Patriots. So, yeah, I look for them to mix things up. Not a ton, but he'll mix things up more than Jim Knowles did. And I know Ohio State fans are salty about Jim Knowles leaving for Penn State. Jim Knowles did exactly what he was brought to Ohio State to do. They had the #1 defense in the country last year, won the national championship. Yeah, he had a lot of toys to play with on that defense, but still, I think Knowles did a good job. And he's going back to his home state. I always liked Jim Knowles. So far, I think Matt Patricia was a good hire by Ryan Day. The good thing about sports, bud, as we all know, we'll find out for sure eventually.
We will. Also, like, the list of coaches who have failed with the Lions is almost like a perfect circle.
Yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, Campbell's the exception to the rule.
They're good now, I guess.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can keep that up. All right, positions that you are most confident in to positions that you are least confident in, defense edition.
Yeah, the secondary is going to be really good, and the linebackers, as I mentioned, will be really good. I'll get more into that. But defensive tackle is certainly the biggest concern for Ohio State on the entire team, unless you say, well, quarterback. I mean, if you like, we were talking earlier about Julian Sayin, like, still he's got to prove it, but he is a 5-star. I think defensive tackle is clearly the biggest question mark on the team, and not necessarily the starters, bud. They like their starters, the projected starters, who both played a lot as the top backups on the national championship team. That being Caden McDonald, the 1 tech. Big guy, 330 pounds. Really did a good job coming in and had a lot of goal line stands last year. They had 3 D tackles in the game, the 2 that got drafted, and Caden McDonald, and that's why they were the best goal line defense in the country. And they like Edric Houston, too, a 5-star, who came in as a DN. They bulked him up. He's going to be that 3 tech. So they really like the starters, their skill level and how they complement each other. You have the true 1 tech, through the 2 true 3 tech. But man, the depth is not where they want it to be at all, bud. It's not even close. Now, they have some guys that they still think maybe can step up, but nobody stepped up during the spring as far as backup D tackles. You're like, that's the guy that's going to come in. That's the guy that's going to be the Caden McDonald of last year. Not in terms of being 330 pounds necessarily, but his impact off the bench, because they like to rotate those guys to a certain degree. They've got some guys. They got Jason Moore, 3rd-year sophomore, Will Smith Jr., 3rd-year sophomore, Tywone Malone, fifth-year senior, and they got Eric Mensah, redshirt freshman. So one of those guys, two of those guys need to step up because, as we're recording this show, they have not landed a defensive tackle in the portal. I think they've done a good job overall in the portal, but they have not landed a defensive tackle. It's going to be hard to land an impact defensive tackle, but that is what they want to do entering the offseason. But right now, Bud, that's clearly the biggest question on defense is depth at defensive tackle.
Ohio State has had some absolute freak shows in the secondary in your long career covering them. Where does Caleb Downs have the potential to be in that list?
Yeah, right near the top, because you think about it, you think of like corners first and foremost. Like Sean Springs was defensive player of the year in the Big Ten and first team All-American. Antoine Winfield, guys like that. He was a first team All-American, Big Ten defensive player of the year. Mike Doss Mike Doss was a safety. Caleb Downs, man, he's got a chance to leave here. I mean, I didn't see guys like Jack Tatum going way back in the day, but he's got a chance to leave here as, if not one of the best, the best, defensive back to come through here because he's so good at everything. They must have used him as like a hybrid, like Mike linebacker at times during the national championship run. That was a big schematic change they made, and they gave a lot of credit to safeties coach Matt Guerreri for that idea. And then sometimes he would drop way back, as a deep safety, then come up in the box. He was doing a little bit of everything and doing them all well. And you look at these mock drafts that are coming out, that they have him like the number 7 pick in next year's draft, which is, as we know, that's really, really high for a safety. It's been a while since a safety's even gone in the top 10. So, he's not a huge safety. I guess that's the one thing if you're saying, well, it's not like he's Sean Taylor back there. He's 6 foot 205, but he plays big. He runs like the wind. And he's another guy, when you talk to him, Bud, he is serious about football, and he's just he just loves football. So, they're in a really good situation in their entire secondary, obviously led by Downs. I think Jalen McClain is going to be the other starting safety. And then they have corners that they really like. Jermaine Matthews played a ton on the national championship team last year, really played starter snaps. He's back. He'll be a starter. Davison Igbinosun's a guy I thought might go pro. Probably wouldn't have been anywhere higher than a 3rd or 4th round pick, but I thought he might go pro. He came back. That's big. He was a starter last year. And they've got some young guys they really like Devin Sanchez and Aaron Scott. They've got Lorenzo Styles Jr. He's going to fill in for Jordan Hancock as that slot corner / safety. So they're loaded in the secondary. They call themselves BIA, best in America. They were last year. I think they had the best secondary last year, and they have the chance to have the best secondary this year, led by the aforementioned Caleb Downs.
They do play some teams that throw the ball around pretty well, and a couple teams who project to potentially throw it around really well. Like we know Illinois has got a pretty nice little passing game with Altmaier. Washington with Fish. That if you have an off day, like they're probably going to score on most everybody. Texas, we think with Arch probably should. I don't see Penn State taking a step back. Like we know they feel awesome about their offensive line. So Drew should have some time to really rip it. And they obviously got I think they got Pena yesterday as well, the Syracuse receiver. So they're going to need to be really good again. That's encouraging to hear that they are projecting that way. This schedule there's like parts of it I love for them, and then there's parts that are a little tricky. Like Minnesota's probably just good enough that you actually have to like pay attention. Like you can't just totally screw around. Like you're going to beat Minnesota with your like C+ game, but if you lay an egg like an F game, like you could, they're going to be jacked up to come play you. How do you define success for this team? Like last year, you called it. It was like, hey, natty game, probably win it or bust.
Yeah, this year, my definition of a successful season would be they have to beat Michigan and make the playoff. And most Ohio State fans will disagree with me just making the playoffs enough, but you got to get the Michigan monkey off your back. You got to make the playoffs and then let the chips fall where they may. I know they're right there with Texas to be they're the betting favorite to win the national championship. I mean, Ohio State's never, ever repeated as national champion. If I had to bet this year, I'll say they will not. I certainly would take the field, but they'll have a chance. They've got a very talented team. They don't have the depth they had last year. They're young. But it is a tricky schedule, man. I mean, you mentioned earlier a game at Illinois. That's always a tough place to play anyway because it's like a wind tunnel there most of the time. And Illinois has given Ohio State some fits over there over the years. And Illinois is going to be a good team. They were a good team last year. They're going to be better this year. You mentioned a team like Minnesota. PJ Fleck always has them like as a solid team at least. Wisconsin has been a disappointment with former Buckeye Luke Fickell, but maybe in year 3 he'll turn it around. It's always hard to play in Madison. You mentioned Washington. I thought they were a bit of pleasant surprise last year because they lost their entire offense from the team that went to the national championship. Jed Fish had them as a solid team last year. They're going to be better in year 2 of the Fish era. You have to play Penn State. You have to go to Michigan. Obviously, Texas to lead off the season. I love that they're leading off with Texas. I mean, it's going to be, obviously, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're like, oh, geez. Yeah. That's kind of a tough opener, but I love it because you almost couldn't write the script any better. They just played in the college football playoff semifinals, a heck of a good game. Then they lead off the next season against each other. That in itself would be crazy. And then who's the 2 favorites to win the national championship, at least according to the odds makers? Texas and Ohio State. So it's a tough schedule. And the good thing for Ohio State is they know you can lose to Texas. You can lose one more game. If you're 10-2 Ohio State, you're a lock to get in. In fact, probably 9-3 Ohio State would get in. But my definition of a successful season is beat Michigan, make the CFP.
To your point on Ohio State fans may disagree because those are the 2 favorites to win the Natty. Typically, Natty favorites are going to be in that like plus 275, plus 250, plus 3.25 range. Ohio State and Texas are plus 600 and 650. I think there's been a real flattening of the sport, and part of it due to the uncertainty at quarterback. Some of these guys have flashed, but they haven't shown it over the course of an entire season at some of these programs. Like, Arch has had 2 starts against terrible defenses. He might be awesome, but he also might just have some growing pains. It's a very, at least preseason, it feels more wide open than it typically is. There are fewer teams that I'm like, no shot to win the Natty. Like, there's probably 7 or 8 that I think if everything breaks right, they probably could. And that's not normal.
Yeah, I agree with you. It feels different than last year, where last year was like, everybody was like, all right, Ohio State was up there. Georgia, of course. I think Georgia was the betting favorite. Then it was Ohio State. Everybody had Oregon. They ended up with the number 1 team, they only had 1 loss. So, and I'm leaving somebody else that was up. Maybe Alabama.
I think Texas was fairly up there too.
Texas was, yeah, you're right. Texas was the other one. Yeah, you're right. Texas was those top 4, and look how it turned out. Pretty close to being accurate there. So I agree with you. I don't think there's like 12 teams that could win it all this year, but I certainly think there's like 7 or 8. Whereas last year I was thinking, probably 4 or 5 teams have a legit chance. And yeah, this year I think it's definitely more than that for sure.
Dave, really enjoyed this, man. Check out Bucknuts, and I'll see you in Vegas. Are you going to Vegas, I assume, right?
I'm going to Vegas, man. I'm going to Vegas.
Awesome.